conquer and we're going to take some. Is that understood? Yes, sir. That's what we're going to do, sweetheart. We are going to go and get some. All right, people, on the ready line. Are you me? Yeah! Are you me? Yeah! What are you? What are you?
In the July issue of EP magazine, read about adaptive sports and recreation. There is also a special military section each month. You can read this issue and past archive issues for free by signing up for EP at www.epmagazine.com.
Monotony. It comes in all shapes and sizes. Dull, tedious, just plain boring. But what is this? A contender, perhaps? Something unboring by the looks of it. Jabs right at dull, an uppercut to tedium, something that keeps you on your toes, keeps your head on a swivel, a knockout punch to your old, boring workouts. Welcome to Fight Camp.
Oscar Mike Radio is a proud podcast partner of REITs Across America Radio, heard every Thursday at 11 a.m. and Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern. They're also big supporters of the nonprofit I Got Your Six, Two Lives at Once. And with every REIT you sponsor through Oscar Mike Radio, $5 goes back to this great organization dedicated to making a difference in the lives of veterans, law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders battling PTSD. Two Lives at Once pairs these brave men and women together with dogs rescued from kill shelters. In this way, two lives are saved at the same time by saving each other. Donate now. Go to REITsAcrossAmerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio to help. That's REITsAcrossAmerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio.
I remember a time when I was in a not so good place, and these games and these activities and being able to come and have the camaraderie that we have here, it makes me feel like I'm not alone. There are people here that have been through what I've been through. It makes me feel like I don't know, I'm part of something great.
Just let yourself go. Give it a try.
Hello, welcome again to Oscar Mike Radio. My name is Travis, Marine Corps veteran and your host. Oscar Mike Radio is co-produced with Sense of One Productions. What's your podcast doing? I want to thank my sponsors, Choice Sassy, ASAC and ASAC Real Estate, and my supporters, Cason Shaving Company, Exceptional Parent Magazine, and Fight Camp. Be your strongest combination. And what a combination do I have for you all, folks, for this show. I love talking to Marines. We're approaching number 250 for our birthday, so each conversation is special. And my next guest is really like right up the road from me, right here in Massachusetts. He is a Marine Corps veteran, and he's also looking at running for governor for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. My first time doing this with Brian Shortsleeve. Sir, welcome to Oscar Mike Radio. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me.
Well, good morning, Travis. Thanks for having me, and thanks for your service in the Marine Corps. Always great to be on with a fellow jarhead.
I'm feeling the presence of Chesty right now, sir. I feel Chesty. It's very appropriate. We're going to get right into this. Every Marine is a rifleman, but every Marine story is different. And we kind of served in the same time frame as we found out, but kind of give us the Cliff Notes version of your Marine Corps experience, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Boston. I'm a Belmont guy. When I was young, my grandfather was my hero. He was a Naval Academy grad who had served in World War II on the Cass and Young, which is a destroyer, a Fletcher class destroyer, which today sits at the Charlestown Navy Yard. So you can go and you can see it. And when I was young, he used to take me and show me that destroyer. In July of 1945, that was the last U.S. ship hit by a kamikaze before World War II ended. And my grandfather was the navigator of that ship. He survived, went on to have a great career as a pilot. But when I was growing up, I always wanted to be a Marine. I wanted to serve. So when my time came, I graduated from Harvard. I joined the Marine Corps. I was in the ROTC program at Harvard from 1991 till 95.
Yeah, because Harvard got rid of their ROTC program, and then they're bringing it back, though, right?
Yeah, well, I tell you, when I was there, it was a big battle. That was one of my first political fights. And by the way, it was a political fight that we won. I was an ROTC student on an ROTC scholarship, and the faculty was trying to terminate all sort of connections with the military. I took that personally, and led the fight at that time to keep the program on campus. In those days, we were Harvard students, but we went to ROTC at BU for the Navy side, BU for the Marine Corps side, and MIT for the Navy side. But you know what? That program continued. It's alive and well today. I'm a member of the Advocates for Harvard ROTC Advisory Board, with some other great Americans like Senator Tom Cotton and Senator Dan Sullivan from Alaska and Governor Ron DeSantis from Florida. So the ROTC program at Harvard, I can tell you, is alive and well, bigger than it's ever been.
Really?
And a lot of newly minted Army second lieutenants, Air Force lieutenants, and Navy ensigns coming out of that program today.
That is awesome. That is amazing. You do this, you join the Marine Corps, and as I understand it, you served during the Bosnia-Herzegovina time. Kind of explain to people what that was all about, because a lot of people seem to have forgotten.
Well, the most important lessons I learned about leadership in life, I learned in the Marine Corps. The core values of the Marine Corps are honor, courage, commitment. The Marines are always, as you know, first in, last out, get the job done, no excuses. Okay, that's leadership. And that's why I'm running for governor. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But when I got out of the basic school down in Quantico, Virginia, I went out to the 3rd Marine Air Wing as a newly minted intelligence officer, and ended up in 29 Palms, or 29 Stumps, as some of your listeners may know it if they ever spend any time out there. Might be the only place hotter than Yuma, Arizona, Travis, where I know you spent a little time back in the old days.
Yuma was hot, sir. Yuma was very hot.
Yeah. So I got out to 29 Palms and then got deployed to Bosnia shortly thereafter. I led a small team of Marines to Bosnia. We supported the 1st Armored Division, which had come into Bosnia after the Dayton Peace Accords. It was a fascinating mission. As you know, in the Marine Corps, it's all about working as a team to accomplish a mission. You get different missions, and the Marines, they always tell you, bloom where you're planted, right? So my first mission in the Marine Corps was to lead Marines to Bosnia, and we ran an operation that downloaded real-time video surveillance from P-3 planes flying out of Aviano, Italy, and we gave that information to company-level commanders, company commander, staff NCOs who are doing patrols and things in Bosnia to support them with real-time imagery. It was a very early use case for trying to bring tactical reconnaissance and UAV imagery down to the company level. It was wildly successful. I was there for about 6 months, served as part of what's called the Stabilization Force. That was a peacekeeping effort that was run by NATO. And then I was back I guess it was end of 97. And then in early 98, I raised my hand again and volunteered to lead a team of Marines from VMU-1 on the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit, which was the Essex and the Duluth were the ships. And it was 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines was the ground element. I was part of the aviation element. And we spent 6 months sailing from San Diego to Kuwait and back in a very slow moving LPD. I think the top speed was about 12 knots, if I recall. It's a long ride from San Diego to Kuwait at 12 knots.
You could run faster than that.
Well, I remember about every 3 days we were getting refueled because I think those suckers can consume a lot of power. And the Duluth was an old ship. Rick Zilmer was our company, or was the MEU commander, as I recall, and I think he had served on that ship as a second lieutenant, like in the late 1960s. So it was an old ship. It was extremely hot, but it was great deployment. We were over there, in the Gulf. We got a chance to stop in Singapore and train with the Marines there. But at the end of the day, look, it's all Marine Corps, all about teamwork. It's all about the mission. In that case, our mission was to work with the Navy and deploy a tactical UAV off the back of an LPD. So we would launch the UAVs off of a rocket launcher. We would land them in a net, and we provided reconnaissance to the SEALs and to the other elements of the ARG who needed aerial reconnaissance as they enforced Operation Southern Watch, which was the no-fly zone in Iraq. It was between the Gulf War I and Gulf War II.
Well, that was interesting you bring that up because, at Bogue South Carolina, and out in Yuma, we play games with the UAVs and realize real quick, like, hey, this is a different kind of warfare. They might be slower, but they're smaller and they can cover the terrain a lot closer. It was a real force multiplier the Marine Corps thought back then.
Oh, it was early too. I'll tell you, Travis, we were early. I mean, when we were launching the Dragon drone UAV off the back of the Duluth, the Dragon drone's about a 6-foot wingspan, and that was a small tactical UAV that enabled us to get in and provide reconnaissance. There was Operation Southern Watch, was the no-fly zone, but the other mission for the U.S. Navy and the Coast Guard at that time was the oil embargo. This was between the Gulf War, so I never served in combat. I was there between Gulf War I and Gulf War II, so we would support various ships and the SEALs as they would board vessels coming out of Iraq. But it was amazing in those days to see what UAVs could do. And for me, I've always been very proud to have been on the early part of the cutting edge of the UAV revolution, because here we are, 25 years later, and there's nothing that happens with the Army, the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Air Force that doesn't include unmanned aerial vehicles.
For sure. You do all that. Before we go into your transition, how did your leadership style and methodology develop during this time in the Marine Corps, sir?
Well, look, I was always a leader of small teams. My unit broke up into small detachments. So when I went to Bosnia, it was me and 15 Marines. When I went to the Gulf, it was the same thing. So in my unit, it was all about small teams. It was about being creative. As at 3rd Marine Air Wing, we used to say, Semper Fidelis may be the motto of the Marine Corps, but Semper Gumby was the motto of 3rd Ma, and that was always flexible. And when I was in Bosnia, we were working with the Army, we were working with the Navy. You really had to be creative and flexible because the mission was always changing. We were operating in an environment no one really ever had. The same thing when I went to the Persian Gulf aboard the Duluth. We'd never launched tactical UAVs off the back of a ship with a rocket launcher. And I could tell you that Navy captain wasn't too happy when I was trying to land UAVs into a net on the back of his boat, because not every time UAV didn't always end up in the net. Let me put it that way. But look, it's about being creative, and the Marine Corps is about the mission. And over there, we had a very clear mission, and we figured out ways to get it done. So I'm an entrepreneurial, mission-oriented leader. For me, it's always like, what are we trying to accomplish? What's the fastest way to do it? And I love working with small teams to accomplish hard missions.
So, I've talked to other officers before when they transition out, and I always tell them, like, us enlisted always thought the officers had like a, stretch limousine pull up with the red carpet and, trumpets announcing their departure. But some officers said, my transition was very easy, and I moved right back into the civilian world. And some officers say, there were some challenges. I was not in a good place, but it seems like on the outside that you kind of had a pathway to service from your service. Can you kind of go into that for me, please?
Well, I remember at Twin on Palms, everyone went through the same transitional assistance program, and I believe it was called TAPS, if I recall correctly. And whether you were a lance corporal, a second lieutenant, or a major, we all went through the same program. I always had a real passion for business. I wanted to serve my country. My grandfather had been in the Navy. I wanted to be a Marine, but I also had a real passion for business. So when I was in my final year in the Marine Corps, I applied to Harvard Business School. Harvard Business School has a very rich tradition of bringing young officers into Harvard Business School. There's 40 or 50 that join every year out of a class of 900. So I get out of the Marine Corps in the spring of '99. My final exercise was WTI in Yuma, Arizona.
Yes.
I remember being at WTI for Easter of '99. I was about 2 months away from getting out of the Marine Corps. It was about 117 degrees. I was in a tent, and it might be the only hotter place in 29 Palms, Travis. What do you think?
It is. It is. People come from 29 Palms to Yuma like, whoa, what is this?
Yeah.
But
So I literally wrapped up that spring. I did not have a finance or accounting background, and Harvard Business School required me to do some finance and accounting before I arrived. So I went to London School of Economics for the summer of '99. I took accounting and finance, and then I started at Harvard Business School in the fall of '99. That was quite a transition because my classmates had worked at Goldman Sachs and McKinsey. They had a lot of business experience. I was one of 40 or 50 veterans in the class coming straight out of active duty that really had no experience in business. So I could tell you, we were long on experience in leadership, and we were short on experience in marketing and accounting. How about that?
Well, you had to be Semper Gumby and figure it out.
Semper Gumby, you got to figure it out.
What started happening when you started figuring it out and started getting acclimated to civilian life and how it all works, sir?
Well, it was business school was incredible because I had a lot of fellow veterans, SEALs, Marines, soldiers. We were sort of in it together. And I had some great friends that hadn't served in the military that helped me. And I think very early on in business school, I had to think about what I wanted to do. And I always had a passion for business, a passion for entrepreneurship. I wanted someday to have my own company. So I ended up going to Bain Consulting over the summer. Okay. It would have been the summer of 2000. I worked at Bain Consulting in Boston, and I learned a lot in consulting about how to drive value in businesses, how businesses control cost, how they drive revenue, how they try to be better every year. Consulting firms are hired by businesses to help them do something better. So I loved my experience at Bain, and I ended up after my second year of business school, I went back to Bain when I graduated, and I had a great run at Bain Consulting in Boston before I got into the investing business in 2004.
Yeah, so you're doing investing, you're doing business stuff, but then you start working back in public service with the MBTA. How did that happen?
Well, I had experience in my days from Bain in financial turnarounds, financial analysis. I knew a lot about how to drive change in businesses. As you know from Marine Corps leadership, momentum in itself is a weapon. You gotta play offense. You gotta solve problems quickly. I think one of the things you learn in the Marine Corps is that leadership is all about making decisions when you have incomplete information, because generally you do have incomplete information. And the great leaders are the ones that can make decisions with incomplete information and really have a bias for action as opposed to a bias for inaction. It's always better to act than not to act. And those are all lessons I learned in the Marine Corps.
You're a patent kind of guy. Imperfect action now beats perfect action later.
You know what? A bias for action. It's always better to take action. By taking action, you move the ball forward. You understand whether it's your battlefield or it's a business problem you're solving. You understand what you're doing. You take the next step. And that's a lot of what I learned in the Marine Corps, is how do you move with a sense of urgency and have a bias for action when you're dealing with incomplete information. And by the way, in the business world, it's very similar. When you're building businesses, when you're scaling businesses and you're turning them around, you have to have that bias for action. You have to be able to make decisions with incomplete information. So I had a lot of experience in that. I was working at a software-focused investment firm in Harvard Square back in 2011 and 12. And when Charlie Baker ran for governor, back in 10, he lost that race, but he ended up joining this firm, and he was a healthcare executive that did a bunch of healthcare investing with us. So for those years, which were sort of 2011, 12, and 13, I worked closely with him. I really admired him. I admired his experience in the business world. And I always told him someday I hoped he would be governor. And if he did become governor, he got himself in a jam, I'd be happy to take a couple of years away from my business career to help him out. So when Charlie Baker became governor in January of 15, he did find himself in a jam very quickly. After 100 inches of snow, ground the MBTA to a full stop. You may remember it.
I rode so we would get on the commuter rail. I'd take the commuter rail. Yeah. And we would literally be stuck on the train for 2 hours.
So that was a tough time. And Baker was a brand new governor. He became governor like January 8th or so. And about 3 weeks later, the snow started falling, and 100 inches later,
it didn't stop.
Yeah.
It just didn't stop.
And what came out of that was the T had major operational issues. But the other thing that came out of that was the T had major financial issues. Operating costs were growing out of control. There was a $300 million forecast deficit. The Green Line Extension Project, which was a critical project that linked Lechmere up to Tufts University, there was $1 billion of federal money, and the feds had pulled the funding because the T couldn't get their act together and get the project launched. So when Baker called me in the spring of 2015, about 10 years ago, he said, look, I want you to take 2 years away from your business, from your family to some extent, because it was a hard job, and give me 2 years of your life. And I want you to do three things. I want you to get operating costs under control. I want you to balance the budget. The T hadn't balanced its budget in a decade. And I want to see if we can get the Green Line extension back on track. We have a good team internally that's investing money to fix the red line tracks and the orange line tracks. It was called winter resiliency. So I went in as Baker's appointee to really focus on the financial turnaround of the MBTA. And I brought a businessman, a Marine perspective to it. And I'll tell you, Travis, I found some amazing things when I arrived. I mean, here I go. I stepped into a business with a $335 million operating deficit. And I started looking for opportunities to save money. You know, on the way in, a lot of people said, oh, well, you know, you're never going to find any opportunity to save money at the T. You know, every cost just seems to go up at 3 times the rate of revenue every year. And one of the first things I did is I said, well, let's take a look at the cost. And I noticed that we had a $3.2 million Verizon wireless bill. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of cell phones. And I know in my family, I look at my Verizon wireless bill every month. I bet you do too.
Yep.
So I took a look. We did a quick audit, and it turned out a third of those phones hadn't been seen, heard from, or used in more than 2 years. So we eliminated them. That was the first $1 million we saved. You know, I called the head of a company that was providing a lot of office supplies and things for the T. We were doing millions of dollars of business. And I said, has anyone from the T ever called to ask you for a discount? And he said, you know, no one's ever called to ask for a discount. You're one of my largest vendors. No one's ever called. And I said, I introduced myself. He said, I know who you are. I know the T's got to balance its budget. So he said, here's the deal. I'm going to give you a discount if you will agree to one thing. You're my only enterprise customer that still orders exclusively via the fax machine. And most of my other enterprise customers started using the website about 20 years ago in 1998. So if the T will get on the website, I will give you a discount because I don't need to employ a full-time person to check the MBTA fax machine every day.
Wait a minute. You're saying that in the mid-2000s, 2015, 2016, fax orders were still being used?
It was at the MBTA. You know, it's a little bit like getting in a time capsule and going back to the 1970s sometimes. So there was another opportunity to save money. We had an operation in Charlestown, Massachusetts, that was a money handling, money counting operation for the T. You know, even Bank of America, the largest bank in the country, they don't run their own money rooms. They work with Brinks to run their money rooms. And, you know, we had some outside advisors come in and take a look at it. And they said, this is like an antique money room. You know, it's like the way we ran money rooms in the 70s. You got 75 people doing the work of 20. It was pretty amazing. And the money room, by the way, had a very rich history. It had failed 3 state audits. It couldn't account for hundreds of millions of dollars. One of the former superintendents of the money room had been arrested and went to jail for spending over $200,000 in 5, 10s, and 20s at high-end department stores in Boston. So this was quite a storied operation. But look, we went in, we said there's a better way to do it. All the folks that worked there were bus drivers. We put them back in the buses. We partnered with a private company. And that's what it's all about. You know, after I was at the T for 2 years, you know, we had the lowest operating expenses in the history of the organization. We'd stripped out waste and abuse. We'd reformed internal systems. We rebid contracts. We balanced the budget. And by the way, the Green Line extension was back on track. We rebid it, got it done for its original price. And today you can take a single seat ride from Lechmere all the way out to Tufts. So what I would tell you, Travis, is that's how you reform government, you protect core vital services, and you respect taxpayers when you bring a businessman's mindset, an outsider perspective, and a Marine's determination to the task. And I believe in Massachusetts right now, we got to do that across the board, because I believe that under Maura Healey, the state is off the rails.
Well, I want to ask you something, because I have veterans who talk to me. They're still in the last year of being in active duty, and they look at Massachusetts and they're like, Travis, what's going on? I cannot afford to get out of the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard and move back to my home state. What's happened? I can't do it. And it just seems like this state has changed. Before we get into some of the things you want to do, tell me first, why should I, or why do you, Mr. Shortsleeve, still believe in Massachusetts?
I love this state. I grew up here. I've built an awesome business here. I've got 3 boys who are now 12, 14, and 16. I want them to chase their dreams and build companies and grow families. I want them to do it here in Massachusetts. I'm very passionate about the state. And this was the fastest growing state in the whole Northeast from 2010 to 2020. So look at Massachusetts today, since 2023, when Maura Healey came in, we haven't added a single new private sector job. We've grown our state budget in an enormous way, over $20 billion over the course of a few years, and our costs have exploded. Taxes are too high. The regulatory burden is too high. Utility bills are too high. Those 3 things, when you look at them, are making this state too expensive for working families to live in. Look at your utility bill, for example. In the same way that I check my Verizon wireless bill every month, I check my utility bill. My bill today, $100 of that bill are not related to electricity. They're related to state mandated fees that are on that bill as part of Mayor Healy or Governor Healy's climate agenda. Those should be stripped out of the bill. If the legislature wants to fund those programs, they should find a way to fund them. But hardworking families in the state shouldn't be paying extra 100 months or an extra $100 a month for things unrelated to electricity. And the reason I bring it up is because those are examples of Healy's policies that are making the state too expensive for working families and working people. I hear the same thing you do when I'm out meeting with people. I was in Marshfield at the VFW for a meeting about 3 weeks ago, and I listened to a woman who is a grandmother, and she's got grandchildren. One of them was getting out of the Army. She'd love her grandson to come back to Massachusetts, but guess what? It's too expensive. He's going to end up in North Carolina, or he's going to end up in Florida, or he's going to end up in Texas. And every time a young person leaves the state, that's a parent or a grandparent losing one of their loved ones to another state. So look, I love Massachusetts. I want to get the state growing again. I think we got to be the most business-friendly state in the Northeast. We got to reduce taxes. We got to reduce fees. We got to reduce the regulatory burden. We got to streamline permitting. And if we do those things, I think we will become a place that is more affordable and starts growing again.
Your platform is kind of like, hey, we got to do the basics to get the growth back where it is. Because I was going to ask you, I'm reading that the state is losing population. It's not as bad as California, but very quietly, this state is losing constituents, and constituents that would, as the state, have families and keep the population growing. So let's just say you go through this and become governor. What would you do to kind of make it attractive to stay in this state? Besides the power bills, because I get mad every time I look at the National Grid website.
Yeah.
And it's not their fault.
Right. I mean, those are state programs. Those are state programs. Yeah. Those are a governor day one. All right. Let me tell you this. You asked me what I do day one. Day one, Governor Shortsleeve, we strip those fees out of your bills. Day one, we streamline permitting. We take a look at the stretch codes at the state level. For example, a new building that's causing the cost of building housing to go up. We look at suspending those things so we can get building going again. And we take a look broadly at the tax load. We have become one of the highest tax states in the Northeast, and it's showing. It's showing. It costs $500 to start a business in Massachusetts. $500, and you got to pay it every year. That's 5 times what it costs to start a business in New Hampshire. It's 3 times what it costs to start a business in California. Those things matter. Unemployment insurance taxes. I'm a small business owner. It's a lot of money in this state. Again, there's an area where we're among the highest in the country. So Governor Shortsleeve, day one, we've got to become much more focused on being business friendly, getting costs for families and businesses down. Because if we do that, we'll become a growth state again. But as you noted, you look at Massachusetts today, there's 500 people a week that are leaving the state. The IRS puts out the number every year as to how much income has left Massachusetts on a net basis, i.e. how much came in, how much left. And the Most recent year was $4 billion walked out the door. We got to turn that around. I love the state, and I'm very optimistic about what we can do. We got great universities. We got great beaches on Cape Cod. We got smart people. We got a lot going for us. But if we don't get the cost of doing business and the cost of living under control, I think we're going to find that we continue to sort of plateau from a private sector job standpoint, and we continue to lose hardworking taxpayers.
So speaking of taxpayers, and I'm one of them, do you think taxpayers are really ready for change? Or it seems like a lot of people like, you know what, this is the way it's always been. I'm comfortable here. I have my home. I have my career. I have my kids in good schools. So it doesn't really bother me. Do you think there's taxpayers are looking for a change at this point? Because in some pockets, yeah, some taxpayers are very upset, but others are kind of like, it just is what it is.
I've been traveling all over the state, and I've spent a lot of time in places like Fall River, in New Bedford. The state median household income is $106,000 a year, which means half of the families in this state make it work for under $106,000. When I'm in places like Fall River, New Bedford, meeting with veterans, meeting with voters, I sense a real desire for change. They're looking up at Beacon Hill. Beacon Hill is awash in money. They've never had more money than they do now. The state budget's now $62 billion. The state budget was $40 billion 5 years ago. That's almost 50% growth in 5 years. It's a stunning amount of growth. Yet, in New Bedford, that money's not getting to them. It's not getting to their schools. It's not getting to their communities. Their unrestricted local aid has been flat. A lot of cities and towns are facing local overrides. So, in a local override, it means a city or town does not have the money to fund police or fund fire or fund schools, and they need to do an override. But here's the amazing thing, Travis, and I'll tell you, there's been 160 overrides in the past 3 years, as long as Healy's been governor. And on average, it's about $2 million. Some are bigger, some are smaller. That's the amount of money that these cities and towns are short. And most of the important work of the government, I would argue, is police, fire, and schools. Okay, that's how most people experience it. So cities and towns are getting crushed. At the same time, the state government's never been more flush with capital. Maura Healey has spent over $1 billion in the last 12 months alone on migrant shelters. Over the course of 3 years, that's $3 billion spent. That amount of money, you could give every city and town in the state $10 million of local aid. If you did that, you would not have had a single override in the last 3 years. Literally, you could solve all of the overrides that people look at, because it's about $300 million of overrides over 3 years. That's 1/10 of what the state is spending on the migrant shelter crisis. So when I look at it, to me, it's all about priorities. I think our current governor has her priorities backwards. She's spending billions on shelters. She's spending millions of dollars on legal aid for migrants, while she is proposing to cut state support for local programs and local services. And we don't see a lot of that money making its way back to cities and towns. So when I'm governor, we're going to push a lot of that money back to cities and towns to do the important work. And we're going to get state government spending under control.
Well, one thing I want to ask about that is at the state level is the Cape Bridges. And I use that as an example of, things that make me nervous, because those bridges I've been told those bridges are past their expiration date. It is amazing work being done to keep those things operational and safe for people. The people working those bridges are amazing. But the fact of the matter is they can't handle the capacity, and they're literally falling apart. But the money is not there to fix them. And I question that, because I'm like, wait a minute. This state has the money to fix it. Like, why are those problems so prevalent in the Commonwealth, Mr. Shortsleeve?
I think it's a question, again, of priorities, right? We have a governor that can find billions to spend on the migrant shelter programs and millions to spend on legal aid for migrants, but can't seem to find money to fund some of these local projects. The Cape Bridges are critical. And by the way, a lot of that money will come from the federal government. But the Cape Bridges provide access to hundreds of thousands of people every year. I would argue nothing is more important for the Cape community than getting those bridges repaired. I was in Buzzards Bay 2 weeks ago. We had a terrific event at Mezzaluna, which is an awesome restaurant. Over 100 people showed up. And what I sense out there is a tremendous want and desire for change. I think people are enthusiastic about bringing a new governor in who could solve these problems. And the Cape Bridges would be at the very top of my list. I was at Captain Parker's in West Yarmouth earlier this week for a meeting with a bunch of local voters and some radio personalities, and it's a big deal. It's something we got to focus on. So I would argue that we need a governor that's getting up every day and focused on solving those problems. Those are bread and butter, basic local issues. What we have in Healy is a governor who's a career politician and who's frankly doing a lot of grandstanding on the national stage, on CNN and in the pages of the New York Times, sticking her finger in the president's eye. I don't think that's good for Massachusetts. I don't think Mayor Wu is good for Massachusetts either, by the way. I think what we need is a team in the city of Boston as well as in the state that can find a way to work with this administration to get the best deal we can for Massachusetts, because those federal bridges or those Cape Cod bridges will require a lot of federal money.
I do know there's a federal component to the bridges, but there seems to be, even with the Biden administration, there's a reluctance to give Massachusetts the money. As I recall, the Biden administration said, hey, you're still paying off the big dig, and that's not worked out too well. So, hey, but, you have that. And then I have to, because I've ridden the commuter rail for 20 plus years, Brian, and I go to Washington, D.C. and ride that rail. And I'm like, wait a minute, what is going on here? I'm paying almost a car payment a month to ride this thing. And the cars, it could be better. There's been times where it's been really bad, and times when it's been good, but it could be better. And, the MBTA, the commuter rail want more money. How should that be done? Because the fact of the matter is people are not riding that system as much as they used to. And it seems hard to get them to do that. Meanwhile, Route 3 is a traffic stop from 6 o'clock in the morning till noon. And these are problems that seems like you're really focused on solving for Massachusetts. How would you do that?
Well, I have a vision for the commuter rail. I'm very ambitious for the commuter rail. If you think about how we unlock housing markets that are outside of Metro Boston, it's really all about the commuter rail, right? The core subway system is going to serve the city. The bus system effectively serves the city. If we want to find ways to unlock jobs in Boston with people that can live in more affordable areas, it's all about the commuter rail. And if you look to the European model of commuter rail, what they would tell you is that to make the commuter rail work better for people, to get ridership up, to enable people to live in areas outside of core Boston and get a train trip in, you need more frequent service. So I think a European model there would be more frequent service. I mean, generally you want to see every 20 minutes, you want a train to be coming by, maybe 30 minutes max. As you get to an hour or an hour and a half between trains, it's too long and people won't ride it because it doesn't work with their schedule. So my vision would be more frequent service, maybe smaller vehicles that look and feel more like a subway. So smaller vehicles coming more frequently. And I think that's how you open up all those outlying areas on the commuter rail. And there's good models. I mean, we can look to Europe to see the way they have done that. A lot of European countries where the commuter rail runs much more frequently with smaller vehicles than what we do now, which tend to be very large trains that are stacked to the top, but are only coming once an hour. So that would be my vision.
As you start, get your campaign in full swing and get out there, winding this down, what do you want people to know about Brian Shortsleeve, the person, the family man, and then, the business person trying to make Massachusetts a better place?
Well, I'm a Marine veteran. I'm a father of 3 boys. My wife and I have 3 boys, and they're the most important things in our lives. And I'm someone that's a proven government reformer. I mean, I stepped into an organization at the T that had a $300 million deficit. We fixed it. Took us 2 years. We got it back on track. So I believe that Massachusetts needs a rescue mission, and we need a Marine in the corner office. I believe I can lead that rescue mission. I believe I can win the primary in September 26 and win the general. And I think this state's always worked better with balance. Having business-oriented Republican governors like Charlie Baker, Mitt Romney, Paul Salucci, Bill Weld. Massachusetts did really well with that model. And I think having a businessman in the corner office means you got someone who has lived in the real world, who knows how to balance budgets, who understands how to keep costs under control, and understands how to solve problems. And that's what I would be day one. Semper Gumby, recognizing that every day will be different as governor, but really focused on the most important things for this state, which is reducing taxes, cutting fees, including all those fees in your utility bill, streamlining regulations and permitting to get housing moving again, and just making this a more affordable state, where working families can grow and can prosper. I want my boys to stay here, Travis. I want them to live here and grow their families and build businesses here. But I do fear if we don't take a different path as a state that's more business friendly, more oriented towards growth, we're going to continue to see people and businesses leave Massachusetts.
I see what you're saying. I have sons. I have 3 sons myself, and one of them already left the state because we did the math, and he's like, I can't make it the way I can make it here, and he is doing very well in another state, and it's regretful. It's regretful, and I definitely understand this coming from. Hopefully, Brian, this is the first of several conversations. Hopefully, I can get you back on around the Marine Corps' 250th birthday. But besides that, I think this is aspect for veterans who serve their country, come back, serve the community, serve the state. There's no reason why others can't do it well. And I hope to learn a whole lot from you.
Well, thank you, Travis. I've got a lot of veterans on my team. I've got great support. Let me encourage folks who are interested in learning about me, join our Facebook page, go to the website, brianshortsleeve.com, sign up as a volunteer. We'd love to get you involved. We got a great team coming together. I think it's going to be a fun year here as we get the governor's run rolling.
Well, what's your website? I'll put the website and the Facebook page in the show post, sir. So
yeah, it's Brian. brianshortsleeve.com is the website, and Shortsleeve for Massachusetts is the Facebook page. We'd love to have all your listeners join. And we got a lot of Marines. We got a lot of Marines on that Facebook page. I can assure you that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I will have those links, Brian, and Oscar McReady's show post. Look, this is the first of many conversations. I love having these kind of conversations. And it shows how the veteran can continue service in many different capacities after they serve our country. Brian, I want to thank you for coming on and taking this time. You're super gummy getting here, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, Semper Fi, Travis, thanks for all you do. I look forward to being on again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're on Oscar Mike Radio. We're mission in flight. Thank you again. We'll see you next time.
The biggest fear Gold Star families have that their child will be forgotten.
We need to never forget freedom wasn't free.
It's the fact that they give us the life we have now. We should remember them and give thanks to them.
If I can be a part of something today that's going to make the surviving family of any of these veterans, these heroes, feel better tomorrow, then it's worth it.
That one wreath symbolizes one family that was able to smile because of the generous donations.
To sponsor a wreath and honor a veteran, visit wreathsacrossamerica.org.
Thank you for listening and watching Oscar Mike Radio, where our active duty service members and veterans are in action and the mission is in flight. Oscar Mike Radio is an oversized load co-Sinister One production. If you are a veteran or know a veteran who needs help, please dial 988 and press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line.